We're here talking about tech for good. And lots of people have different definitions of what is tech for good. Can tech for good be good if it makes a profit? Can tech for good be good if it harms some people and benefits others? So I'm interested to hear from the panel, apart from the projects you're personally working on, can you give an example of what you think is a real tech for good project that you've learned about? Chris, can I start with you?
A real project? Or a project I want to see?
Ooh. What do we think? Real or made up? Both.
Both.
Okay, audience says both.
I mean, there's lots of, like in my field of cancer research, AI is and the ability to use AI to diagnose and look at different images is really changing the way we diagnose cancer. So now, for last 100 years, it's been human beings that have been diagnosing cancer, and literally in the last few years, we've been training machines and computers to diagnose cancer on the fly better than any human could ever do. So this is really changing the way we diagnose cancer, and that's changing things for the better, for the good, because if we diagnose cancer sooner, the more likely the patient is to survive. There's still some things we can do. I think we still need better ways of looking at cancer cells, imaging cancer cells, and that's what I would like to see done. There's still a lot of hardware things that need to be changed in cancer research, and that's what I'm excited about in the next 20 years.
Let me talk about blockchain technology, because that is where I come from. So I think when we talk about, there are a lot of good ideas that are there in the market, and people are trying to solve really good challenges. I think a couple of them which are using blockchain technology to do good is, like, one of them is ethical, basically, which is providing banking services to people who are stricken by poverty, right? Because if you see, there are a lot of people who, because of so many reasons, don't necessarily have good credit score, or maybe they have lost access to funds or whatever. So I think they are using blockchain technology and other emerging technologies to create platform to provide access to funds to people who are not necessarily applicable to access in the normal real world. So that is one of them. There's another very good project which is basically kind of very close to my heart as well. It's about energy trading. So it's peer-to-peer energy trading, but it's actually the key thing is it's about empowering the community to basically generate energy, and then also basically trade it in a peer-to-peer fashion, and then it's all about renewable sources of energy.
Is there a particular project?
Yeah, so there's this project named Diota, which has been started by 2 people from Oxford University, and which is in early stages, but I think that is one project I think I would look out for.
Perfect. So my space is education. So I know a couple of really cool projects that I personally follow or part of. So one of them is Founders for Schools, and you can all become part of this. If you're a founder, you should sign up, or if you have any other background in technology, design thinking and whatnot, because teachers do really need you to help them demystify technology as a career and what opportunities there exist in STEM. So Founders for School is a great platform where you sign up as a mentor, and the schools then reach out to you and invite you in to do a talk or whatnot. Another really cool initiative that I really like is called Century Tech. And they're helping teachers, but I think there is lots of opportunities in education to make it more personalized, or help teachers achieve, or students to save them time and whatnot. So education.
Thanks. So something not cryptocurrency, blockchain related, you said. Well, there's this project that I found really, really interesting and sort of close to my heart in one way or another, but very exciting, is called, and also close to me because it's a London-based project as far as I know. It's called Transport. And it basically helps disabled people move around the city, and it tracks them in real time, and it sort of helps navigate through the madness of public transport, the tube, and I think that it's something that we tend to forget living in cities like this, it's often absolutely shocking. Whenever I travel to, I always wonder how people with disabilities just survive, and what kind of it's just incredibly difficult, and sort of sidelined in some ways, to wonder what the reality of that life is. So I think that in terms of social impact, that was the most compelling project that I've seen recently.
This would probably be a contrasting one, but it's called Seeing AI, and it's by Microsoft, and it's a artificial intelligence which aids blind people to essentially see, and they wear these glasses, and they simply just swipe the glasses and it reads what's in front of them, or it reads a menu, and the AI continuously learns. And I'm just so astonished to see something like this is being developed, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the future.
And I'd like to share just one little project that I actually saw a video online recently looking at augmented reality and surgery. I don't know if anyone has looked into the research behind how they are now tutoring surgeons with AR, so they can effectively take slices, pictures of your brain, MRI scans, turn them into augmented reality and place them on skulls so surgeons can learn better how to locate certain areas of your brain. So I think that's pretty amazing. I'm actually going to ask one more question because I feel like I want to get to the audience, I want to get to you guys. So we've talked about the amazing things that could exist. So why don't they exist? And I would like to learn only maximum of 2 barriers per person that you think as to why there isn't more tech focused on good in the world today.
It's a tough one. For us, I mean, it's not there is AI available, but in cancer research, a lot of the things we struggle with are probably similar to what you guys struggle with in the finance sector, is that it's just getting access to all the data and getting it in one place and moving it around. It's kind of boring problems. I'm moving data around and storing it and putting it all in one common place where researchers can access it. But as a cancer researcher, this is something we really struggle with. Is we have cool AI, we have cool ways to analyze the data. It's just the data is often not available to us. There's not enough of it. We don't share enough. So the collaborative aspect is really what's missing for us.
I think the most common one is about the lack of awareness, right? Because I think for me also, I think till few years back, my understanding about non-profit and for-profit was always like, I think if it has to be something for social good, it has to be non-profit, right? And that is where I think a lot of people with very, very good ideas, they are still staying away from this industry because I think they don't understand that you can still make money and then you can still do something good for the society. And even this basically translates into the lack of fundings. There are some good organizations which have started basically providing funding in this space, but then obviously I think since this lack of awareness is there in general in the industry, so that is where I think there's a slightly bit more struggle than I think if you are talking about something else. Yeah.
I'm actually going to challenge you, and I'm going to say I think there are many examples of technology that's addressing real problems. So it depends on how you define good. So for me, find a problem, solve a problem, and if it addresses a real problem, if the pain is severe, then that is a great problem to solve. And there is a lot of technology examples out there, but the classic problems will remain. There is either lack of funding or not the right time, or so many other reasons why startups would fail, and the same apply for tech for good. I suppose some barriers would be, but I don't know. I can't think of any significant barrier that is not the same as in the ordinary commercial, startups. So tech for good doesn't need to be anything different to just ordinary company, because in my opinion, we all have the potential to start something great. It's just the matter of when are we going to wake up to realize there is something we can contribute to and a problem that we can address. So, but lots of examples, we just maybe don't know about them enough. So, like, as in the tech, in the women in tech space, if we showcase women as role models, we learn about them. But most of the times, you see the same women featured all over, again and again and again, right? Until you see someone else. But if we can showcase more tech for good examples, and people learn about them. In the UK, here in London, there are so many accelerators that actually incubate tech for good startups. Wire is one of them. Math Challenge was another one of them. But there are many other examples. Cast is another example that really only works with social enterprises and charities, and shows charities how they can use technology for good, or how they can integrate technology into whatever they're doing. So lots of application.
Yeah, I quite agree with you. I think that not every business is born from an idea to disrupt the technology and sort of empower people and change people's lives and improve people's lives. However, beyond the accelerators that you mentioned and the different programs that are out there, I feel like there's also significant encouragement for companies and businesses that don't necessarily address those problems to develop or integrate technologies that could actually help them go to that angle and sort of solve a real issue and do something for good. I think there's, if anything, I see sort of a promising encouragement in this space for that.
I think scaling is also an issue. Just when you create projects, whether it be an app or a program, it's usually at a local level, and you really want to scale this up and make it global to really have an impact. But I think the trouble with doing that is there is still an intrinsic fear of technology, and my parents themselves are scared to use iPhones still. So it's like you've got to educate the people who haven't grown up around technology about the benefits, and possibly that could help tech for good spread further.
Just for the audience to sum up on that point, it's quite interesting. I think we heard the word almost awareness at least 3 times, maybe even 4 with those comments. So it sounds like raising awareness and educating audiences is very important. It sounds like actually, do you know what? Maybe there is no difference between tech for good and tech. If tech solves a problem, is ultimately good. Yes, and there's so much we can talk at the pub. And then also the fact the siloing of data, which people can talk about whether blockchain can or cannot solve that, which is a whole other debate. And if data is siloed, how do we bring that data together and actually use technology that can analyze it in a way that is useful? So that sums up my panel questions. So what do you have for the panel? Over to you, audience. Oh, we've got 3 hands. 1, 2, 3. Oh, 4. We'll let these 4. And if you just say who the question's for, and then the question. And your name, sorry.
Okay, my name is Yetunde Johnson, and the question is to the 2 ladies who spoke. Mm-hmm. Technology does solve problems, but inevitably also it creates problems. And this is for technology for good. And the lady from Luno mentioned about Africa. And I'm thinking that recently I read about smart AI, and it's coming into the manufacturing industry in Bangladesh. Now, the manufacturing industry in Bangladesh to do with the textile industry, where they already employ a lot of people. Now, that technology coming in also creates a problem of making people redundant. And how do you educate that? How do you use technology for the good to educate the mass of people, both in the African continent and in other emerging continents, who lack skills already, and bring them into this new world we are all looking towards?
Well, it's a good point, because automation is, going to, I think a lot of jobs are going to disappear in the next decades to come. And, technologies are highly disruptive, and especially in emerging markets, they create a lot of employment opportunities, but also I think the solution or the way to sort of go about it is to really simultaneously drive this awareness, educate people, especially on how to remain employable, what kind of skills, how to upskill yourself to, not every job, every skill is actually, going to be automated. There's a lot of professions, and there's a lot of actually technical courses, and not necessarily higher education, but highly technical professions that will be necessary to operate the machines that potentially will be replacing us. I think that the companies that I can think of or involved in those industries would, I think, carry the obligation sort of or responsibility in terms of helping drive forward the different educational initiatives to keep that on track and sort of not let that stay behind in order to not disrupt the society in a very negative way, like you said.
So I think it's inevitable. A lot of jobs will be lost, as my colleague has just alluded to, but it is the responsibility of the governments to take action to address this. And I take your point. There are many governments that really don't care about populations, right? They don't really care about people. And we can't really expect them to address this. So which is why we really rely on the educational system to teach kids how to learn and how to become, how to remain, how to become adaptable and how to not stop learning. So it's about being agile and it's about being adaptable, and not every system can do that, unfortunately. So it is a concern of mine that, technology, on the one hand, it's saving the world in many, ways, improving our healthcare, addressing climate change, addressing so many problems, but at the same time, it is actually increasing the inequalities. And it will affect in many people losing jobs. But research shows that as many jobs will be lost, many more jobs will be created, and that is inevitable. There will be just different kinds of jobs. And it is unfortunately those who can adapt, those who can learn fast and have got access and opportunities to learn, they will survive. And those that I'm concerned about, those that don't have access to internet even, and there are many, even in the UK, who don't have access to internet and don't know about all the educational opportunities. That is really the target that will really miss out. And I don't know. It's something that I'm really concerned about, and I don't know what the answer is. But I am hoping governments will wake up. And I personally find it easier sometimes to work with dictatorial governments, because if you put me in front of a dictator, and I have been in front of a couple already, and if I convince them that they really need to invest into AI skills and technology skills and STEM, then all they have to do is tell all schools and all teachers, we're going to do AI, and AI gets then adopted, that curriculum gets adopted across all of schools. This is the only benefit I see with those centralized systems. And whereas systems like in the UK, democracy, as we call it, very, very hard to work with. And I see sometimes young people in the UK are more deprived in so many ways than young people in Africa that we work with. Because young people in Bangladesh, in Africa, they don't have any opportunities, but when they offered, they are so opportunity starved that when they do get an opportunity, like participating in our programs, then they just achieve incredibly well. And it's really down to those governments to take that step and to see that really they need to do something about it, because if they don't, there will be unrest, there will be all sorts of other things and problems that they will experience. But it's inevitable in many.
Should go to Sean next. Oh, okay.
Hey, my name is Magdalena. Great debate, great presentation, so thank you guys. I actually have two things. One issue which wasn't mentioned, and in my opinion is the most important. So as Maria mentioned, we have 2 billion people who are unbanked. The question is why they are unbanked. And in my head, there is one main reason. It's lack of regulations and over-regulated systems. We created system which is not scalable. So we track everyone who buys a burger on Liverpool Street, and it's not possible to track everyone on the world, right? And if we are talking about Africa, we have 1 billion of people. In China, 1 billion of people. You can't track everyone. You can't KYC everyone. So I would like to pick up your mind about the regulations and how we can move this forward. This is the first thing. And the second thing is about the education. This is kind of my favorite subject, because we discuss about the augmented reality, about artificial intelligence, amazing, sexy things. Recently, I was involved in a project of adding beauty filters to facial recognition payments. Awesome, right? Really sexy. But to be honest, we forget about the basic things. People in Africa, they are not on that level. If you are talking to them about the artificial intelligence, augmented reality, it's like talking to the starving person about a diet book. You don't do that. When the people are starving, you give them food. You don't educate them about the advanced technology. So why we are not focusing on giving them basic things? Bank account, saving account, access to the loan. This is what we should focus, and those sexy things are good for developed countries. I really like the speech of you when you mentioned I'm bored here in UK. I'm passionate about the emerging markets and really involved in that, and to be honest, sometimes I'm also bored here.
Thank you.
So just would like to ask, what do you think about this?
I'm going to challenge you just very slightly, just to start with. Actually, having done, I went to a hackathon, design thinking for solving issues in voting over in Nigeria, which was led by those working at the polling stations in Nigeria. And we actually spoke about initially having a solution related to the banking verification number and the polling verification number and how we could use those together so people could vote. And they challenged us to say actually only 30, I think, you'll have to check up on this, I think it's around 33% of the population are currently banked. And when we questioned why, it was because they didn't trust the banks. It wasn't because necessarily they couldn't get a bank. The surveys that they came with us to, the research that they presented to us during those design thinking things, a large percentage of the population weren't used to using a bank, never intended to get a bank, never wanted to go and have the government checks, have the KYC to have a bank. So I can't guarantee that's the only reason. I'm sure there is many, many reasons, but we do have to take into account the fact that some people choose not to enter the banking system. We have to question why. The second one is the fact that we're actually looking at facial recognition and understanding aging based on machine learning of aging, I think it was facial recognition for the polling station. So they were actually looking at that as a solution. So that's the first thing. I'm going to move on and maybe we'll get some of the guys to answer this one, okay? So, Shiv.
So I think it's a major problem as such, right, with respect to inclusion. And I think, let me take the example of India, right? So we have 1.3 billion people there, right? And now what government has done with respect to inclusion, with respect to improving lives, they have basically provided, see, identity is one of the biggest challenges, right? Because without a human being in the system, they won't be able to get the benefits which the governments are trying to provide. So that is where I think the problem statement starts with identity. So what India has done is like they have provided identity they have managed to basically provide identity to 1.3 billion people. Then the second step that they did was basically they started opening bank accounts. Actually, in some cases, as you said, it's correct that some people are not interested. They don't come forward with respect to getting these services which the government is not providing. It could be a trust issue. But then India managed to basically open bank accounts for a large percentage of the population. Now what has happened is that has basically created an environment of inclusion, social inclusion and financial inclusion. So basically now newer organizations are basically coming up with business ideas with respect to micro lendings, right? So that is where people with very, very small incomes, they can manage to basically take loans which were earlier not accessible, right? So in that sense, technology is actually, so obviously, first of all, there should be that attitude about solving the problem, but then technology supports those, so tech is for good, right? That is what the point here is that, so the point about that, instead of feeding poor people, why do we focus on technology? Because you can feed so many times, but if you use the right technology to empower people, then they can feed themselves.
Regulation.
I think given the fact that we have some experience on the ground, maybe Luna should have
yeah, so I just wanted to touch on the point that you said, what are the reasons why they're unbanked? And as you said, I believe that there's a lot of countries where people just don't trust the banks, and several African states would be the case, where people just don't trust putting the money into banks. They don't trust their currency. And those are the cases of highly inflated states. But there's also in the research that I was actually taking the data from, that was it's called FinTech, and that's demonstrated how many people are unbanked. They also listed questions that they were asking those unbanked individuals, like why do you suffer? Why are you on the fringe of this financial infrastructure, financial system? And the main answers are unpredictable and high fees. Second is the distance to financial institutions and banks, so actual geographical, their geographical situations. Obviously, insufficient funds, so suffering poverty. And also insufficient documentation. So I'm very impressed about I do not work with in India, and I didn't know that this project has been so hugely successful. But identity is a massive problem in finance, in creating that inclusive financial system. So those would be the reasons that I would find as the primary.
Oh, Chris, of course.
I mean, I think there's these things like AR and AI, VR and AI, these advanced technologies sound like they're very out of range for people in developing countries, but in fact, a lot of them are very empowering technologies. Doing big data analysis using AI, it's actually a very cheap technology that you can use in business and cancer research that actually can allow people that don't have much money or don't have much infrastructure to do very fancy things. I think that's what's exciting about this technology is it's actually empowering. It's not beyond the reach of these people in these countries. So I think that's what's cool, and that's why we should be excited about it. We shouldn't think that it's beyond the reach of the developing nations.
I suppose I go to almost agree with you there in terms of the fact that maybe they don't have the legacy systems that stop them from having access to the data because they could just build afresh. If they want to put a digital infrastructure into a country, they can go, what is going to be the best digital infrastructure for the future? And let's build that. So thank you, panel. And has anyone we'll take one more question, I think. Have we? Oh, 2 more questions. Susan's my timekeeper.
Hi, I'm Fema. I just had a point for the guy doing cancer research. Chris. Yeah, there's a lot of open data now. So if you want to train your algorithms, I don't know if you've already seen that, but a lot of organizations in the US have made that data open, so you can now do that. But I do have a question for the lady who did the Africa cryptocurrency project. A lot of what you said is really quite good and very idealistic, and I really appreciate that. Cryptocurrency isn't massively regulated, especially in the UK, and it also ends up being used for the things that you highlighted as positive ends up being used in a very negative way, like on the dark web, buying and selling weapons, etc. And you talk about like the lack of stability in African countries. So I have 2-part question. One is, how do you ensure that your vision is realized and it doesn't get used in the way that it's currently used in the UK, in the dark web? And the second one is, have you actually done sort of a trial run of like maybe a small population where you've given them the option for cryptocurrency and ironed out like any problems or issues with that?
Okay, so I did not address the sort of challenges and the negative PR that we have as in the industry about dark web and money laundering and all those terrible things that are happening. So just to clarify, if you think about the fiat currencies and the traditional financial system, there is money laundering. There are bigger scandals than the market cap of Bitcoin today. And you can take as an example the still ongoing scandal from the Danske Bank where there was $200 billion laundered. So I think that there's a lot of attention on the maybe very initial use of cryptocurrencies to buy things on marketplaces that were not legal from the very beginning of the existence of cryptocurrencies. But this is really a fraction of where the actual use of crypto is. And there's a lot of things that we do and a lot of partners that we work with to track this illicit activity. Companies like ours, we self-regulate. So you mentioned that in the UK it's heavily regulated, but the reality is globally that we are still waiting for regulation. We're trying to advance it. We're trying to, lobby and work with regulators around the world to move this forward, to create controls and processes and procedures that are really to the standard of banks. So for individuals like you and general public to have this confidence that this is a legitimate system that is not used for illicit activity. And I understand that people have heard a lot about the negatives, but there really is a lot of opportunities and a lot of good that cryptocurrencies carry along. And in terms of eliminating the bad players, regulation is exactly the answer. So companies in our industry, there's a lot of us that we work together, competitors or not, to get the regulation in place so that the bad players, the scammers, whoever is using cryptocurrency for bad purposes to be eliminated from this space. And the second question, if you could repeat, I would appreciate.
I asked if there was, if you trialed it in sort of a small population in Africa to see how it kind of panned out.
So in terms of trialing in a small population in other African countries, there's, we can't just expand into every country in Africa as we are today or tomorrow. Obviously, we do have to, as a company that is an intermediary and the gateway into cryptocurrency world, we don't have our own currency, but we facilitate the acquisition and the use of cryptocurrencies. We have to work with the regulator, with the local bank, and with as effectively institutions locally. So we can't just scale up to a small population and a small portion of society to see how it pans out. But we have experience. The company was founded in 2013 and started in South Africa. And the crypto awareness, the appetite for this alternative in the countries where there are controls around, currency exchange and capital cross-border transactions, this is a very compelling alternative. So we've seen this in South Africa and Nigeria take off hugely as a very viable alternative to different assets and investment opportunities.
Hi, I'm Sean. I'm from a sort of cybersecurity background. So my question is, do you think if you set out to do a sort of high-profile project that's using technology for good, that's using 4IR for good purposes, to benefit a nation or a demographic or people with a certain disease or whatever, do you think you potentially paint a bigger picture on your back and you actually need to be more aware of people trying to, subvert that? Because for every good intention there's kind of an opposite one, I guess. And then supplemental to that, do you think there are any specific problems in the sort of charity and tech for good sector that relating to security and to sort of cybercrime that are more unique to people trying to affect good than just generally tech for profit, which I guess is the alternative?
Testing. Okay, apologies about the sound. I'll hand this down. I think particularly looking at it from a healthcare perspective, because I'm from quite a digital health background, the worth of your data and your health data is very, very high. And sometimes the knowledge and the focus on, for example, cybersecurity within some of these organizations that have very, very old legacy systems, I think there's definitely some work that needs to be done there. I think maybe sometimes the financial sector or those that could lose a lot of money if something went wrong might have a slightly different focus than if maybe patients' data. But again, that's just something from personal observation.
I guess on the flip side, AI can also be confused relatively easily, and it's potentially a dangerous technology to use in some circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, we have this problem all the time because we have lots of patient data that we have to keep secure. On the flip side, our computers are getting better at decoding anonymized data and figuring out exactly who you are. So we can figure out your face from your DNA. We can figure out your disease from your face. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do about this because I don't think we're secure anymore, at least in the healthcare field. So I think we just maybe have to accept the fact, this is my own opinion, that all your data is going to be out there and we're just going to have to get used to it.
You know, I think this it's a very, very good point, and I think the major problem is that as of today, most of our IT systems are centralized in the sense like they are kind of storing the information of millions and billions of people together, and that is where blockchain is there to try to solve that problem, right? So I think with respect to cyber security, we can talk about identity information, we can talk about data of people. So we have seen a lot of organizations like Facebook, Google, BA, they have been hacked, right? Because obviously I think because we have technology which can basically kind of hack decentralized systems. But with blockchain technology, with these decentralized systems where we are not storing the information at one place, we have privacy, we have immutability, we have transparency, we have traceability. So in that sense, blockchain technology is kind of solving this problem for us, right?
I mean, at the global level, when we look into geopolitics, we're all often faced with question as to, you know, if something goes wrong, who is to blame? And if a country, you know, abuses human rights of their population using technology, you know, how do we make that country accountable, let alone a company as well? So at the global level, I can't say we have got this right yet. We don't have the regulation yet sorted. We do have IEEE, if you're aware of this, who are creating standards all the time, but we don't really have an international system that would make companies accountable if they hack into the system or whatnot. So it's like, think about Amnesty International and how many, you know, dictators have managed to get away with a lot of abuse, or people who took us, you know, into war with Iraq or whatnot. You know, a lot of politicians that we think should really be held accountable have not really been held accountable. And the same applies to technologies and the companies. So self-regulation is great, but there needs to be global regulation. So country, local, but also, you know, somebody who will make countries accountable if that needs be. Like, look at what China is doing, for instance. You know, if anyone wants to say to China, you shouldn't be doing this, will China really listen? Probably not. Exactly. So when it comes to hackers, I suppose it's the same. Yeah.
So in my opinion, it's a difficult one because the algorithms will only get more accurate the more data that you feed them. So you basically need more data from people to train them. But I think there is an issue of people just understanding how much data they're giving away. Like when you sign up to Facebook or to Google, some people might not realize that they can track your GPS or your location. And so I think it's all about spreading awareness.
Yeah, so the training data gets you into an interesting intellectual property space as well. So if you've got an algorithm that's been trained on certain data, who does it belong to?
Yeah, or same with your genes. You know, 23andMe. Yeah, you don't own your genes, they do. So to conclude, thank you so much to all of our panelists, and thank you, audience, for being here with us. So give yourselves and the panelists a round of applause.